Maurice Gontran, Intellectual Vanity, Illusion of Superiority, and Painful Awakening of Consciousness. The testimony of Spirit Maurice Gontran, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, brings incisive reflection on the effects of intellectual vanity, pride disguised as intelligence, and the refusal to look at oneself. His account demonstrates that spiritual suffering can arise when consciousness, after passing, perceives the distance between the image it constructed of itself and the moral reality actually lived. Maurice Gontran manifests with lucidity, preserved memory, and full awareness of his identity. However, his spiritual state is marked by disturbance and restlessness. In life, he excessively valued his own intellect, cultivating a sense of superiority and veiled contempt for views different from his own. After death, this mental structure collapses in the face of the direct experience of the continuity of consciousness. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this state. When the ego relies almost exclusively on intellect to sustain personal value, any evidence that confronts this foundation provokes an inner crisis. Intellectual vanity functions as a psychic defense. When this defense falls, consciousness comes into contact with feelings of emptiness, inadequacy, and regret. Spiritism clarifies that Maurice Gontran's suffering does not stem from knowledge itself, but from the distorted use of intelligence, which has ceased to serve good, empathy, and moral growth. Intelligence without humility tends to close off, preventing real learning. In the spiritual realm, this mental rigidity translates into suffering as consciousness resists change. Modern science reinforces this reflection by showing that the progress of knowledge depends on openness to error, constant revision of hypotheses, and a willingness to learn. Rigid cognitive systems collapse when confronted with new evidence. The same happens with consciousness. When it closes, it suffers. When it opens, it evolves. Another striking point of the testimony is the beginning of reflective awakening. Maurice Gontran begins to realize that he confused intelligence with wisdom and criticism with superiority. This recognition is still accompanied by discomfort, but it represents a decisive step. Consciousness begins to free itself from the illusion that imprisoned it. Spiritism shows that this state is not definitive. Suffering persists as long as there is resistance to learning. As consciousness accepts revising beliefs, developing humility, and integrating moral values into knowledge, the inner state transforms. Spiritual progress requires inner flexibility. This testimony also invites us to reflect on a common risk in our time: confusing information with evolution. Knowing a lot does not mean living well. Spiritual life does not assess the volume of accumulated knowledge, but how that knowledge has been used to improve oneself and benefit others. Maurice Gontran teaches us that intelligence is a powerful tool, but it needs to be guided by humility and ethics. When it becomes an instrument of vanity, it turns against one's own conscience. When it aligns with good, it becomes a path to liberation. Reflecting on this account is an invitation to inner vigilance. Asking ourselves whether what we know makes us more understanding, more responsible, and more human is an essential exercise in spiritual maturity. True wisdom begins when intelligence learns to serve consciousness. If this testimony helped you reflect on intellectual vanity, humility, and the conscious use of knowledge, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.